It's live now. Good morning, everybody in the UK, and greetings to everybody else from planet Earth. Thank you for joining. Destroying the Cloud Security Myth, or myths, I guess. 5 facts and many other facts you're going to find out today. A couple of hygiene issues before we dive straight in. Save yourself if you, hopefully there is no fire, but if you do, if there are any things you need to do, look after yourself first. You can always come back and listen to the recording. This web session is going to be recorded. It's a debate. It's a panel session, and you can come back and listen in. There will be downloads, and that you can also look at your screen. You can download now, and you can also download after the session is over, because Bright Talk allows us to add artifacts and downloads after the webinar is over. Before I introduce the panelists, Core to Cloud, thank you to them for arranging these marathon webinar sessions. We had 2 yesterday. Today is Tuesday, and we're going to carry on. So let's go straight in and introduce the panelists. The guy with the blue turban, that's me, but I'll talk about myself last. Richard Walters from Sensinet and Stuart Green from Checkpoint. Richard, over to you first, if you don't mind. Take a minute and introduce yourself, your experience, and we'll talk about Sensinet also a little bit after that. Go on, sir.
Perfect. Thanks, Amar. Good morning, everyone. So Richard Walters, currently CTO at Sensinet. Been with Sensinet for a little over 3 years. You can tell from the photograph and the grey hair that I've been around for a few years now. I think I'm into my 26th year in security. It's something like that. So long career with both end user organizations, large and small, but then more recently with various vendors. I was CTO of Integralis, for those of you that remember Integralis, for 6 years, and have then worked for numerous vendors. Worked very closely with Ed McNair as CEO. This is not the first rodeo that Ed and I have done together. So prior to Sensinet in 2011, we founded a company called SaaSID. And SaaSID was the first cloud access security broker, or CASB, before the term had even been invented by Gartner. So very happy to be here today and look forward to discussing the myths.
Excellent. So, Richard, basically, you're only 26 years old. Thank you.
Yeah.
Stuart, how old are you? I'm kidding. Stuart, sir, over to you.
I've not got quite that many years experience. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Stuart Green from Checkpoint. I'm one of the security engineers working with the channel partners in the UK. Experience, I've been kind of in the IT industry for about 15 years, so not quite the 26 that Richard's got, but enough to know some of the kind of technologies that we've got out there. I used to work in distribution, so I've picked up technologies like Checkpoint, F5, Bluecoat, Fortinet, Juniper, all of the things you get to work with at distribution. It's great because you get lots of exposure to different technologies. I've been with Checkpoint now for coming up to 3 years, so it's been good to focus on a particular set of technology rather than jumping around between different vendors, and it's good to get a bit of focus on a particular product portfolio. The last couple of years has been focusing pretty much purely on cloud. So, as Rich said, looking forward to discuss some of the cloud myths that we've got planned.
Excellent. So, folks, Richard Stewart is only 15, and I am. That's a good one, actually. That's a good way to introduce people rather than your actual age. I'm about 22, I would say, being in the industry. And I've got a lot of experience. I'm a practicing CISO, CEO of Cyber Management Alliance. We do a lot of trusted advisory in crisis management, in cyber crisis management and cyber and privacy. And I am quite excited, as always, very excited to be here and talking to experience. The topic of this particular webinar is about the cloud, and the fact that actually the cloud has a lot of benefits to offer, but at the same time, what we are going to discuss today is the cloud security angle and what you can do based on what we have from Sensinet and Checkpoint. I mean, Stuart, so that you know, in 2000, I was working with Checkpoint. So Checkpoint's a very well-established name from that angle, and they were one of the leaders in doing firewalls and whatnot. So the good old days. So that makes me about 22 years old. So let's go straight into the question. So Richard, if you don't mind, I'll start with you, sir. As we were just discussing before we went live, most people who are using Office 365 and even things like LinkedIn don't believe that they are in the cloud. So what you were sharing with me, if you want to share with the audience here, and then let's kick off this thing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the vast majority of organizations that we talk to, many of them don't consider themselves to be heavy cloud users. And in fact, we'll be having a conversation about some of the capabilities that we have around cloud application security, and some of the key challenges that we help organizations through. And people will quite often say, "Can I just stop you there? We're not in the cloud." And you go, "Oh, okay. Do you use Office 365?" And they say, "Well, yes." And you say, "Do you use Salesforce or another CRM system?" And they say, "Yeah, no, we use Salesforce." Do your users use LinkedIn? And your sales teams use LinkedIn? Yes. And do customer services use things like Facebook and Twitter? Yes. And that puts those organizations firmly in the cloud, whether they kind of realize it or not. And I think really there is quite a sort of a different mindset in different regions globally as well. I mean, North America, cloud adoption is many years ahead of where we are in Europe, and that's even more true of certain countries in Europe. And I'm thinking, Germany, for example. Amar, I know we met out at the
Yes.
one of the conferences in Munich a couple of years ago. And for 2 days, 1,000 people descend on this conference center in Munich, and they talk about cloud and identity.
Yeah.
But none of them have adopted the cloud, and none of them have got any plans to adopt the cloud.
Yeah.
So I think really there is these kind of productivity and team and collaboration type applications, and people have a different perception of those type of applications versus maybe using NetSuite as a total end-to-end financial backend. Or using something like Workday or Ceridian for human capital management. I guess if you're not outsourcing or putting a core business process and associated workload in the cloud, it's very easy to think, well, we're not really in the cloud because we use things like Office 365 and Salesforce and LinkedIn. But actually, a lot of the risks and a lot of the challenges around certainly adopting something like Office 365, which is a fantastic suite of applications and tools. But if you don't think about things like data management and data security and the user experience and Microsoft best practice of using direct to internet connections, and if you don't consider the additional load that things like Office 365 place on traditional network infrastructure, it's very easy to underestimate how difficult adopting some of even these productivity type tools can be potentially.
Excellent. Stuart, thank you, Richard. Stuart, we're focusing on Dome 9. I know Checkpoint does so much, but if you don't mind, let's focus on Dome 9. Can you give me and the users a bit of introduction into how Dome 9 kind of works a little and what it does in the cloud and why it's relevant?
So Checkpoint acquired Dome 9 in October 2018, and compared to the rest of Checkpoint, Dome 9 is quite different. So since 1993-94, Checkpoint have been very well known for their firewall technology. Dome 9 is quite a step away from that and is our first true cloud product where we focus on getting visibility of the assets that you have in public cloud and the configuration of those things. As we've spoken about, so many customers are moving to public cloud without necessarily knowing exactly what they're doing, because public cloud is so accessible and so easy to get into and start deploying things into. Not everybody pays as much attention to security as they perhaps should. So what Dome 9 aims to give you is a single view of all of your public cloud configuration, the assets you've got deployed, and it gives you an engine to wrap compliance control around that. So if you were interested in something like GDPR or PCI or ISO 27701, within a couple of clicks and a couple of minutes of sort of processing time, you can get a very quick and easy report back on how close you are to any particular framework that you might be interested in.
My apologies. Sorry. In terms of using Dome 9 to protect the cloud infrastructure, can you spare a minute or so in terms of how it works?
Yeah, sure. So Dome 9 is a SaaS service itself. So it's all web-based. You don't have to have any infrastructure or any type of agent installed.
Mhm.
And once you have an account on the Dome 9 platform, you integrate your public cloud account. So we support Azure, GCP, and AWS. We also support Kubernetes as well, although that's not strictly public or private cloud. It kind of depends on how you deploy it.
Okay.
From there, once you've linked your accounts in, Dome 9 connects in via API call. So we are able to pull in the metadata about your instances, your S3 buckets, your storage, your security groups, your ACLs, anything you've got configured for your infrastructure in public cloud. And we can run that through our compliance engine to give you a really simple way of saying, do I have too many ports open to the internet? Do I have too many S3 buckets open to anyone on the internet without any sort of security? So if you follow any kind of cloud or even just general security news, you'll see that there are a number of companies who are using S3 because of its ease of use, ease of provisioning. But there are a number of cases where people haven't secured it properly. Last year, I think, or maybe 2018, there was an incident with a large financial corporation where somebody within AWS left, and they had some sort of knowledge of the inner workings of AWS and exploited that to take, I think, 100 million users worth of data out of the platform, all very easily using, ultimately, a poorly secured S3 bucket. So what Dome 9 hopes to give you is that type of visibility and security control from one point of view, where instead of having various teams within your organization going out, spinning up different cloud accounts, provisioning resources within them, that gives you one view and one place to control all of that. So you have one security policy or a number of well-refined security policies across your organization that give you a consolidated control. Rather than having each of your users log into different cloud platforms, do things in a different way, and potentially introduce misconfigurations that way, if your users are using a central tool, that's much less likely to happen. And you get a far greater level of control over what your users are doing across the different cloud platforms that way.
Excellent. That's much more insight into, and I think many organizations are going to be in that position where they may have a couple of AWS and Azure and GCP even, and the biggest challenge I see when we do a lot of trusted advisory for clients is they need visibility across the platform. As a CISO, I need to know where the misconfigurations are. And I'll come back to this. But Richard, if I may, using Office 365 is I guess even more important than bread and butter, and I guess toilet paper. Dare I say that? But you know what I mean, Richard. Given where we are in the pandemic, but coming back to what SensorNet does in terms of, because Office 365, as you said, has an amazing set of tools, its use and abuse is absolutely, the abuse of the features is one of the biggest headaches and concerns as a CISO, right? I'm looking at, I want to roll out Office 365. How do I, as a CISO, one, get visibility into these complex and I mean, even Stuart knows this from the infrastructure point of view, but Richard, these folks are introducing features every day, right?
Yes.
How do you stay on top of this and still keep everyone happy?
Yeah, and we talk a lot about so-called cognitive friction, I guess. If you're responsible for administering Office 365, part of the challenge, and it's almost a full-time role, just staying up to date with everything that Microsoft are releasing and changing. I think all of us as kind of users of Office have experienced it, where we've moved to a new version of Word, and suddenly something that used to take you 10 seconds takes you 10 minutes to find where they've moved it to and where they've hidden it. And it's exactly the same within all of the multiple sort of administration screens within various admin and security and compliance centers within Office 365. And stuff does move around and stuff just disappears, and you end up digging around to try and find it. Unless you're on the most expensive Office 365 E5 plus EMS E5 plan, when you do finally get a single pane of glass, or as close as Microsoft will ever come to a single pane of glass, to allow you to administer the suite. I think it's really interesting what Stuart's just been talking about, because the way that you would typically go and gain visibility over all user interaction with cloud applications would be to use a cloud access security broker, or CASB. And I suppose very closely related to CASB technology is what Stuart's just been describing, which is DO9, which is, I suppose Stuart won't mind me calling it, a cloud security posture management solution.
No, I think that's the new Gartner name for these things.
Yeah,
this week.
And I think what's interesting is that we've never really believed, and this is the second time we've built a CASB solution now. We've never believed that CASB is a standalone technology. It is one tool in the security team's arsenal, I suppose. But standalone, it gives you very, very little. Because, for example, if you're going to allow users to go home and grab the children's laptop or the wife's iPad in the evening, and they can log into Office 365 from that completely unknown device, then you've got the potential to not have any visibility or insight into users' activity when they're using that non-instrumented or unmanaged channel to access Office 365. So that kind of leads you into requiring identity and access management in some form, probably using things like federated identity standards like SAML and ADFS and OAuth and OpenID Connect and so on, to ensure that all access to a cloud application, such as the applications that sit within the Office 365 suite, are over a managed or instrumented channel.
I get that. Sorry to interrupt you, Richard. We covered identity yesterday, but focusing on the visibility angle now. There's so many features. If a user enables email forwarding, example, right?
Yep.
And if for those who cannot afford the, I think you said EL5 and EMS or something, the wonderful licenses, how does SensorNet offer that feature set where an organization who doesn't want to go into the top end of Microsoft's licensing, but they can still maintain visibility, so transparent visibility, right? So still let people use Office 365, but SensorNet would allow them to have that visibility in security settings. Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the E5 plan from Microsoft is the plan that they focus on for enterprise organizations. And then you've got equivalent variants for education and government and not-for-profit as well. They're called A5, E5, G5, and I forget the last letter. But what you can do is you can buy down to a cheaper Office 365 plan. Typically that means buying down to E3, and then you can supplement the features within E3 with specialist tools from vendors like Checkpoint and SensorNet. And where you end up is still at a price point that can be quite significantly below the cost of that E5 plus EMS E5 plan. So even if you buy down to E3 and then top up with specialist security solutions, you can actually save 20 to 30% is typical.
20 to 30%.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Which when you look across E5 plus EMS E5 list price comes out at around £369 per user per year from memory. So saving 20 to 30% of that across even a few hundred users, it starts to be a material cost saving.
Absolutely materially. Wow.
Just to come back
yeah.
to your question around, how do you stay current with all of the features and everything else? I mean, I guess that's the challenge on the vendor, and we absolutely take on and accept that challenge when you're offering a CASB solution. CASBs are typically driven off some form of application catalog. And that application catalog will consist of thousands of applications typically, and tens of thousands of individual actions that a user can perform within those thousands of applications. And at SenseNet, we've got a dedicated team that do nothing day in, day out, but maintain and extend that cloud application catalog.
Absolutely.
And for example, across the top or the most popular cloud applications within that catalog, we've got continuous automated assessments going on 24/7, looking for changes and updates to those applications. And when there are changes or updates, they are immediately flagged. And then typically, updates and changes are made to that catalog to support the changes to those features or support additional features if there's new functionality being introduced. So that's how you kind of stay current, I suppose.
Excellent. No, thank you, Sen. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to get Stuart's kind of move to Stuart for a second. Stuart, and your challenge in terms of the cloud is, the myth that you can't, it's a challenge, right? To gain visibility. So you touched on how Dome 9 is offering that. Can you expand a little bit? So I've got AWS, I've got Azure. Let's assume these two for now. What do I have to do? Because right now, as you know, the challenge is the accounts. People just creating instances and using multiple Chrome tabs or browser tabs to log in and manage, and then it starts to spread. Now, shadow IT has always been a problem, but this creates an interesting headache. Such as you mentioned, S3, but the bigger headache of everyone just doing what they need to do to get the job done.
Yeah, visibility in public cloud is fun, depending on how your organization approaches it. So one of the requests that we get from a lot of organizations is they've got, in a scenario where, let's say, for example, you've got a business that acquires another business and you've got multiple cloud teams, both doing things in potentially different platforms and different accounts, different subscriptions. It's very difficult to keep track of what infrastructure you've got and what type of risk that presents to the business. Now, when I say risk, I mean essentially attack surface. When you're moving into the public cloud or extending your on-premises network into the public cloud, you are increasing your attack surface. So it's good to be able to see from one point what your attack surface is, essentially. So with Dome 9, you pull in all of the metadata about your assets, your security groups, and your ACLs. And with all of those in one place, it makes it very easy to run posture management or compliance policies across the different platforms. So rather than having one team looking at one account in isolation saying everything is fine, yes, we've got all of the required ports open or closed on our instances, our load balancers, whatever it might be, you can look at all of the accounts and apply one business policy to all of the cloud platforms. So if you have a business policy that says we only want to deploy assets into regions in Europe, not anything outside of that, you can assess that very quickly and easily. And then you can build on that by saying, okay, we're deploying into Europe, that's fine. What about open ports? What about ACLs? What about security groups? What about multi-factor authentication, SSL, logging, etc., etc.? You can take any of the checks from the public cloud platform and abstract that into Dome 9. So instead of having your different teams, let's say you, again, with the example that you're merging security teams from different organizations that may have been merged or acquired, rather than having to say to the AWS team, you've got to learn Azure and make sure your policies are compliant that way, and then the Azure guys learn AWS, Dome 9 understands both of the APIs on both of those platforms. So you don't have to learn a separate set of tools. You don't have to learn a new way of doing things. You choose the right policy or the right posture management rule set within Dome 9, apply that to the public cloud platform, and then get your results back, and you can act accordingly. If once the team have got used to that and they've built the policy and they're happy with how that works, you can take it a step further. So rather than have an engineer or a cloud architect, whatever the relevant person is within your organization, rather than having them spend their time on manually fixing these things, you can take it a step further and move it into automatic remediation. So rather than taking your reports in the usual fashion of you log in, you click, you type some things and you do it the kind of hard work, the manual labor way, you can automate it. So as soon as it finds a problem that you have defined as being against your business policy or your business posture wish, you can then take an automatic reaction and say, okay, we found, let's say, an S3 bucket, a storage facility. It's been provisioned outside of the EU. We're going to take an automatic action to fix that and make sure our business is continually in compliance.
So are you saying orchestration? So the minute
essentially, yes.
Okay, sorry, go on. Expand on that a little. So because that's one of the big headaches in the cloud is misconfiguration and people leaving data where they shouldn't be and forgetting to secure it. So you're saying I can monitor Azure, I can monitor AWS and automatically correct this? Is that what you're saying?
Definitely, yeah. So if you want to call it automation or orchestration,
yep,
kind of blurs depending on which camp you're from. But essentially, yeah, if you use Dome 9 as a compliance or a posture management tool to assess your public cloud infrastructure and say, this is our business policy, I want you to continually check each of my public cloud accounts for any violation toward that policy or that posture.
Mm-hmm.
Once it finds it, it can then trigger what we call a cloud bot, which is essentially an open source Python script that can remediate whatever it is that it finds. That remediation could be one of our out of the box features that we provide, such as stopping an instance, deleting a security group, modifying rules in a security group, or it could be as simple as dropping a message into Slack or sending a notification into Azure Security Center. Essentially, if you use Dome 9 as a technology platform, you can have it trigger an API call out to whatever you like. That API call could be one of our cloud bots, or it could be something on a managed service portfolio or managed service platform that you manage. And that could trigger an engineer getting in touch with a customer to say, dear customer, we found a problem. Don't worry, we've got an engineer working on it. Or it can fix it automatically. It's an API. So the limit is kind of your creativity and your coding ability rather than the platform itself.
Very interesting. Yes. I mean, that, to me as a CISO, that kind of approach, and this is obviously regardless of product, but that kind of approach to consolidate my view into misconfigurations, into people. I mean, developers need to get the job done. So I can't blame them at all because they just have to do it, right? But as a CISO, my job is to then make sure that these misconfigurations are shut down straight away, right? And I like that. I really like what I hear. Thank you, Stuart. So, Richard, a quick one. You say you have, you're analyzing 134 variables. Because the other headache, apart from what we were talking about, visibility in AWS, is email. And I know CASB, but I think CASB is a separate, maybe one or two webinars, which we can talk about. But sticking with defense, I think you call it Defense 365, correct?
Yes.
So sticking with that, what are the variables? Why so many variables?
Well, I guess Defense 365 is a collection of features and functionality across everything that SenseNet provide within the SenseNet platform.
Okay.
That relate directly to Office 365. So, because I suppose that the suite of applications that Microsoft make available as part of Office 365 or Microsoft 365 is so broad and diverse, that kind of means that if you want to provide tools to help with things like user experience, data management, data security, then by definition, it's quite a diverse range of tools that you've got to provide an organization to gain that visibility or protection and actually acceleration around the Office 365 suite. But yeah, email security is a key component. Microsoft are processing so much email that they don't have the luxury, I suppose, of being able to use all of the different tools and technologies that leading email security providers can. Every message that we process when we provide email security, you're absolutely right. We smash every message into about 134 different parts. We use well in excess of over 10,000 algorithms against those 134 elements and attributes and characteristics of a message. But that takes about 200 milliseconds to perform all of that analysis. And 200 milliseconds doesn't sound a lot, and a user isn't going to perceive that there's been a delay of 0.2 seconds in delivering an email message to their inbox. But for a provider the size of Microsoft, or Google with Gmail for that matter, or large telcos and ISPs like Telefonica or Vodafone or AT&T or Sprint, the volume of messages that they're processing, 200 milliseconds multiplied by the number of messages, adds up to a huge amount of latency. Apart from the commercial challenges of being able to use everything that we do at SenseNet, for example, at that kind of scale. So email security has become dramatically more challenging in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, I suppose.
Are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Sorry, I thought I'd lost you.
I think I'm still here, hopefully, Amar.
Okay, yes. Okay, we can hear you. No, okay. That's interesting. In 134 variables, are you saying there's no loss of speed, no loss of delivery in terms of speed of delivery to the inbox?
Well, to perform that kind of analysis, with 10,000 algorithms against 134 different elements of every message, of course there is a time associated with doing that analysis. It's round about 200 milliseconds per message, so it's about 0.2 seconds. That's the kind of delay that we're introducing, but we are using multiple layers that are designed to protect against not just the traditional email threat, so large-scale spam runs. They do still exist. They're at a much lower scale globally than they were back in the early 2000s. Spam today makes up for a typical organization maybe 20 to 30% of all mail flow. Rewind the clock to the year 2000, and it would have been 70, 80, 90% of all mail flow would have been spam. But you've still got to protect against that traditional email threat. But you've also got to protect against the very modern impersonation attack or CEO fraud message, that very simple plain text email that looks like it's come from the CEO to somebody in account saying, please make the transfer or pay the attached invoice in the next 60 minutes or the world's going to end. And actually the technologies that you use to defend against spam and the traditional email threat is useless against the modern email threat. And I think that's why we're seeing quite a lot of change within the email security space. McAfee were the first to exit. Symantec have kind of dumped the problem on Broadcom to an extent. And then you've got quite a few smaller vendors that have just chosen to exit the market because email security has been around a long time, and most of the email security solutions are based on legacy technology. It's all around pattern matching and recurrent pattern matching, which is great against the traditional email threat, but absolutely of no use whatsoever against business email compromise, account takeover, highly targeted phishing attacks.
So question from the audience, can you integrate threat intelligence? For example, from the UK government, they do CISP, right? The Cyber Information Sharing Intel, sharing platform and partnership. So can I integrate an existing threat intel feed so that your platform can then go, ooh, okay, this is the new update about, I don't know, WannaCry, example, the most famous one, and let me block it straight away.
So we've kind of integrated with multiple threat intelligence feeds within the platform. It's taken us about 2.5 years. It was something that we all thought internally would take about 6 months. And actually, the challenge was finding threat intelligence feeds that provide good coverage in the region that we operate in. So, i.e., in the UK and Europe and EMEA.
Yeah.
So many of the threat intelligence feeds are North American focused. So if you look at people like Recorded Future, Reversing Labs, there's a huge number out there. An awful lot of them are North American centric. And what we were finding was we were seeing threats within or attacks hitting our customers that were not included in those North American focused feeds. Or if they did appear in those feeds, it was 72 hours before they did appear, which, in security terms, that's about as much use as an ashtray on a motorbike.
Right.
So the 2.5 years of effort was in identifying threat intelligence that would actually provide a level of protection to customers based in Europe. So we're up to about 14 feeds now. Some of those feeds are commercial, some of those feeds are non-commercial, some of them are government feeds. So, for example, at about 6 o'clock every morning, we receive a feed from the National Cybersecurity Centre in Cheltenham, for example.
Excellent. Yes, that's what I was referring to. Okay, very good. So you get that feed by default, and customers can make use of that?
Yeah, so one of the elements within the SenseNet platform is something that we call the autonomous security engine. And all of the threat intelligence feeds come into that autonomous security engine, or ACE. And then the relevant information from each of those feeds gets pushed down into the individual services within the platform. So if it's a new domain that is known to be fishy or spammy, for example, that domain would be automatically blocked within email security.
Excellent. Okay.
If it was a new fake login page that was being used as part of a phishing scam for credential capture, the URL of that fake login page would automatically get pushed down into the web security service, and that page would be blocked for all users automatically.
Excellent. That is actually very useful. Okay, and that's a good question, so that users don't have to go about fiddling to try to integrate the threat intelligence. Thank you, Richard. Stuart, if I may, Stuart, to you on the topic of infrastructure, AWS and Azure and GCP. One of the challenges, as you know very well, is having visibility is great, and being able to connect it to these and manage them is great, but I think you probably need a separate degree just to understand all the nuances of just AWS alone, right? So how does Dome 9, what's that word? I'm not saying dumb it down. Maybe I am. How do you make sure that anyone can easily start getting value out of Dome 9? Am I making sense in my question?
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Having gone through some of the AWS and Azure certifications recently, yes, there's certainly a breadth of services, terminology, tools, workflows, and things that make it difficult to get to grips with. So what Dome 9 does is it abstracts away from that. So you get a common language to create your posture management rule sets with. So we have a language called Governance Specification Language, or GSL, which sounds complicated, but essentially it boils down to writing natural language-ish query language to assess your public cloud for various things. So if you wanted to check for something like if you had a particular port open, or if you were running an instance in a particular region, the code would be instance should have region like, and then your region name. So you don't have to learn something like SQL or jQuery or JavaScript or anything complicated like that. If you want to get a bit more complex with it, you can add in certain scripting elements, regular expressions, that type of thing. But if you want to check something quite easily, you can type it in more or less natural language, and you've got a guide to help you with that as well. So instead of having to learn a new language, amongst the other languages that you might be learning, Python or Go or Ruby or anything, you've got a policy builder. So you can just click on little building blocks to build your policy up and say, I want this particular element, I want to check it's within this region, I want to check it has this particular text string in it. And it saves you from having to learn a completely new tool. And that's one of the things that makes it easy to work with the multiple cloud platforms, is that one simple tool that you do have to pick up is common across each of the platforms that you're working with. So you learn it once and you can redeploy that across each of the 3 major platforms that we support.
So you learn, okay, this is why this is a very important question, right? Because as a CISO, and if you can buy the latest and greatest technology, but if the people who are not going to be able, the operations, if they can't run with the product and they have to spend hours trying to figure out what to do, I think it's a pointless endeavor. So what you're saying, as I understand, is one interface, one GSL language, as you said, the governance. What was it? GSL.
Governance specification language. Yeah,
Right.
it's our kind of a high-level scripting language that allows you to interrogate your assets.
Excellent. So one window, one platform, one GSL, and I can my team, my operations team can then manage the 3 completely differently and weird named products, from Amazon to Azure to GCP.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that to me and folks listening in, I think that honestly it's an extremely it's all a massive headache, because otherwise, you need certifications. I'm not saying don't do AWS certifications, but you need to know that in depth to manage the inner workings of AWS or Azure. But I think from the visibility point of view, from the governance and risk management point of view, it makes it significantly easier if you have one kind of, and Dome 9, are you saying, Stuart, then manages the interaction between the platforms?
Yes, definitely. So it can work in 2 ways. Either you can have some knowledge of the platforms that you're trying to assess, and you could say, I know what an S3 bucket is, I know what a security group, I know what an ACL is, I want to check that they have these details in them. Or you could take a slightly different approach where you would use Dome 9 as a technology platform to slot into your workflow or your CI/CD process. So if you wanted to check that if your team or your business were doing infrastructure as code, you could have Dome 9 check that code before it gets pushed out to the public cloud. So rather than assessing what you've got out there, you can insert this as a forced part of your kind of production conveyor belt and have it check that you're deploying to the right region, you're deploying with the right security groups, you're deploying the right image names. And that could be a forced part of the process. So users can't get around that. So instead of having users be required to learn these different tools, this is a transparent part of the process. So when it's pushed out to production and you've got new instances or new storage being provisioned in the cloud, it automatically gets checked by Dome 9 and users don't have to know it's there. If what they're submitting is good and it's valid work, it will go through and it will carry on as per normal. If it needs extra attention, then it will come back and say, actually, you've provisioned an instance in the wrong region. Did you mean to do that? You can't proceed until you fixed it. So it gives you, if you want it, an automated level of compliance as part of your workflow.
Very, very interesting. Very useful. So hold on. Are you saying I can even developers can use Dome 9
Definitely.
for CI/CD integration?
Yeah, so you can consume it, with your keyboard and mouse and web browser. You can log in and you can run your compliance reports that way. If you're more interested in a higher level report of how compliant you are to a particular framework, or if you want to embed it into your workflow, you can use Dome 9 at an API level. So you can connect to Dome 9 via API. That will connect to the cloud platforms via API, and
Right.
it can connect out to various monitoring, alerting, or reporting tools via API as well. So if you want to, you can use Dome 9 without ever having to log into the web interface.
Excellent. Very quick question, and then Stuart, to you also, actually, and then we're starting to wind down. It's been a really very insightful kind of conversation with both of you. Quick question to you, Stuart. Implementation, as in time to roll out. I think I know the answer, but if you can take a minute to expand what needs to be done. So if someone does want to try this or implement it, is it relatively straightforward?
Yep, definitely. We've got various teams aligned to different industries and different customers in the UK. So if you are a Checkpoint customer, get in touch with us and we can help you roll it out. Otherwise, if you just want to give it a try and see the power of the platform, you can go to dome9.com, sign up for a free account, and you get, I think, between 7 and 8 kind of copy, paste, click steps to integrate your accounts with Dome 9. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, you'll be able to run a couple of free reports to assess your public cloud environments. All very easy. Typically with training or POCs or demos, we've got customers up and running with a report within about half an hour.
And you don't need to be an existing Checkpoint customer?
No, definitely not. If you are, you'll have the relationship with Checkpoint and we can get in touch and we can help you and guide you through it.
Right.
If not, you can do it totally on your own back and just go to dome9.com, sign up, and create a demo account for 14 days.
Excellent. Okay, that's very useful. Stuart, sorry. My apologies. I've completely lost the name. Stuart and
Richard.
Richard, so sorry.
Right.
A complete blank. My apologies. Richard, in terms of your product and if someone does want to implement it, because it's integrated with Office 365, is it, again, relatively straightforward, click and install, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess different services are configured in different ways. From an email security perspective, it's a very simple DNS record change. You change the MX record, which is part of the DNS record on the domain, and then mail will flow through our servers. And we've got various towers in Europe and in North America, so you can choose where you want to have email analyzed, I suppose. From a web security and cloud application security perspective, it's a little bit more involved. You have to be able to intercept all HTTP and HTTPS traffic.
Okay.
And we can do that in two ways. You can either deploy a gateway on the network, which is a Linux VM typically, that runs the SensorNet gateway software, or we have agents for endpoints. Both for Windows devices and inevitably Mac OS X as well, and so you can push those agents out in the way that you deploy any other software within the environment.
Okay,
very straightforward.
Excellent. And so I think we've answered all the questions that have come in. A polite reminder to the users: there's an offer for our training, but there's in the downloads, but there are also other downloads that you need to check. And I wanted to, first of all, and very importantly, thanks Core Cloud. You can reach out to them for any further questions on this, corecloud.co.uk. This and other webinars, there's a series of webinars running. So once you check this one out, you can go to the other webinars. Personally, I believe every webinar has golden nuggets, and I think today also there was quite interesting stuff to learn. Stuart, I'll start with you, and then Richard, if you don't mind. Stuart, you first, take a minute and give any final closing comments, and then Richard, to you.
Yeah, like I said, if what we've talked about, the Dome9 technology, sounds interesting to anyone, feel free to reach out and we'll help you with setting up a trial account. If you've got a Checkpoint account manager already and you're an existing customer, get in touch with us and we can arrange to help you with demos, POCs, and guide you through the process of setting up Dome9, getting onboarded, integrating your accounts and generating some sample reports so you can get a grip of what you've got running in the public cloud, if it matches up with your expectations, and if not, how we can help move you towards some sort of setup where you've got an automatically remediating cloud where some of your more trivial problems look after themselves.
Okay, excellent. Richard, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I mean, I guess the website is the first place to go, sensornet.com. There is a whole hub within that website around all things Defense 365. There's some really good independent analyst research that compare and contrast going with Microsoft for everything, or buying down to that less expensive Microsoft plan and then taking specialist security solutions to take you back to a similar level of functionality but with considerable cost savings. We offer free trials of the platform and all the services that exist within that platform, and you can certainly sign up for the trial via the website. We do have some promotions and going on at the moment. We are helping an awful lot of organizations protect remote working or remote access.
Yeah.
So we're offering multi-factor authentication free of charge at the moment for an initial period of 3 months, and we'll see what happens with the current situation. We're open to extending that if we need to.
Excellent. I wanted to thank Richard and Stuart, SensorNet and Checkpoint. And from my side, I think it's really important to take away golden nuggets. I think, like I said, every webinar that I have ever done, there is something you can learn. And I learned quite a lot today from both the Office 365, the cloud angle, and on the CASB, and also on Dome 9's visibility of your various and varying infrastructure. Thank you to the audience. Again, thank you to Core to Cloud. Have a good day.